The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The race for Illinois governor enters the home stretch with just weeks to go. Millions of dollars spent on attack ads. How will voters react?
Plus, reaching for the treetops, we'll meet some Chicago artists who are branching out where few sculptors have gone before.
And a new economic reality is reshaping some formerly affluent suburbs. We take a closer look at suburban poverty tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Tonight, a closer look at poverty where you'd least expect it in some of Chicago's wealthiest suburban areas. Nationwide, the number of low-income people has grown 5 times faster in suburbs than in cities.
DuPage County is prime example. Since 1990, the number of people living in poverty there has skyrocketed by more than 150%.
Trying yellow tomatoes?
No, thank you, but I do need a head of lettuce. And those salad tomatoes.
This could be the scene at just about any grocery store in the Chicago area. The well-stocked shelves and aisles crowded with shoppers loading up their carts.
There you go. You're all set.
But this is no supermarket. It's a food pantry in suburban Naperville called Loaves and Fishes. And for those struggling to make ends meet, it's a lifeline.
I was a forklift driver, but I lost my driver privileges, so I couldn't drive to work.
As a result, Shamar Finley, who lives in Naperville, lost his job. A regular visitor to this food pantry, he can fill his shopping cart to the brim and walk out the door without paying a penny.
You know, when you're down and out, they give you a lot, and I'm able to feed my family, and, you know, they're happy, you know.
Finley is one of the thousands of people living in DuPage County who depend on Loaves and Fishes for groceries. Despite an economic turnaround in some places, the need here has grown 7% over the last year.
We have difficulty convincing people in our neighborhood that there are people here who are struggling to make ends meet.
Jane McDonald is Director of Nutrition and Wellness at Loaves and Fishes.
They're my neighbors, my friends, people that I've known all my life who are suddenly in situations that they didn't expect.
We have had no income from my husband for several years, so this place has really helped us meet our expenses.
Kathy Abraham of Naperville visits Loaves and Fishes twice a month.
I just get the basics. Nothing fancy for our family. We live very simply.
Times have changed here in DuPage County. This suburban enclave, known for leafy towns and McMansions, was once considered the 23rd most affluent county in the nation. Now it struggles with a new economic reality. Hard times have left 174,000 residents barely able to get by, and many charitable organizations struggling to provide support.
You know, like Salvation Army or stuff like that. They're wonderful people, but they're trying to help so many, and they don't have enough people to give and to help. So
we've got a big cluster down here in Burr Ridge. We've got another cluster in Bensonville and Addison and Glendale Heights and Carroll Stream and West Chicago and Naperville, and basically they're throughout our county.
Candace King is Executive Director of the DuPage Federation on Human Services Reform. Her aid group located next to the Illinois Department of Human Services office in Villa Park, where she sees evidence of the growing need every day. People lining up for state benefits, from link cards to Medicaid.
They lose their jobs. The recession caused a great increase in that population. And those folks aren't accustomed to being poor. They don't know how to be poor.
That pretty much describes 48-year-old Melinda Panzer, a registered nurse who lost her job in 2008 and then endured a financially devastating divorce. She and her ex-husband once lived the good life.
We made, anywhere from $290 to $350, $100,000 a year.
On the surface, Melinda appears to be doing fine, but don't let the fancy 4,000 square foot home on a shady cul-de-sac in Naperville fool you. All 3 mortgages on her house are in default, and Melinda relies on a link card for groceries.
I just coupon it up and watch the sales and, you know, do everything I can to make it stretch.
This former mental health nurse never thought she'd find herself here.
Working in the field of nursing I was the one, you know, who always advocated those services for my clients, and now I'm needing them.
Melinda realizes she's lucky compared to those who don't have a roof over their heads. On average, there are about 1,400 homeless people in DuPage County and no permanent shelter. Many end up sleeping in local churches through a program called PADS. The group works with 160 different congregations and provides case managers to help people find permanent housing. But as Candace King points out, the need far outstrips the county's capacity.
What we lack is the infrastructure of poverty. We don't have enough food pantries, homeless shelters, transitional housing.
King says DuPage County officials have responded by creating DuPage Access to provide free health care, a forerunner to the Affordable Care Act. But she said the perception lingers that poverty remains an inner-city problem.
Federal money, state money, and private philanthropic money goes disproportionately to the city compared to what the need is.
So why is suburban poverty on the rise when the headlines say the economy is growing and more people are finding jobs?
They're going back to work, but they're not getting paid enough to meet expenses.
The truth is, many of the clients who come here are working. They have a job, but they just can't make enough to support their family. They need help.
The solution is to figure out what can we do to help these people not be poor anymore. And I think the good jobs and good wages and housing that they can afford is a big part of the solution.
With this suburban shift in the nation's poor comes a warning from experts who say it is critical for suburbs to find ways to help people get back to work and back on their feet, or they risk further resembling inner cities with entrenched neighborhoods in economic distress. Now here's Chris with a look at some other stories making headlines.
The governor's race gets personal, and body cameras for cops, just a few stories we're discussing here.
Pat Quinn raised taxes on everyone, took about 1 full week's pay from each middle-class family every year. Now he wants to make it permanent.
The race for Illinois governor is heating up the airwaves.
Bruce Rauner has 9 luxury homes worth millions of dollars. He even made $53 million in a single year. Yet billionaire Bruce Rauner wants to cut the minimum wage.
And now, with the contest between Governor Pat Quinn and Republican Bruce Rauner getting closer, will negative ads tip the balance?
I think it's a kind of poor taste to trash the other people. I think the candidates should focus on their ideas and what they would do.
Another important race is getting closer too. Republican Jim Oberweis moving up in the polls in his bid to unseat Democratic Senator Dick Durbin. Mayor Emanuel is also running for re-election. Now he's making a big push to raise the minimum wage. But can Chicago businesses afford to pay $13 an hour?
We definitely support raising minimum wage. It's terrible that people can live on subhuman wages and that people are fighting it.
Candid camera. Chicago police will consider allowing officers to wear body cameras. They would be able to record the actions of the officers and civilians being stopped.
I think anytime we're adding cameras on officers, whether it's on the body, whether it's in the patrol cars, it makes everyone safer.
They have to remember to turn them on, and sometimes they may not, considering the circumstances.
And joining us to tackle those topics are our guests, author Gerard McClendon, author and attorney Charmaine Cruz, and Deborah Olivia Farmer, president and CEO of the Brown Farmer Group, a communications company. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Labor Day is traditionally the start of the political season, but when it comes to the Quinn-Rauner race, they've been battling all summer. And Gerard, what is the risk for the candidates in going negative so early?
At this point, I don't know if there is a risk, because even though candidates want to keep things positive, negative advertising works. I mean, this is why President Barack Obama wrote 2 books before he even ran, because he said, let me get the dirty laundry out so no one will attack me with it. It's too bad to see the dirty laundry aired and the mudslinging that takes place, but to win the gubernatorial race, it's probably going to have to take negative advertising, Chris.
Sure. I mean, one of the themes here obviously is class warfare. We saw the ad again about Bruce Rauner's 9 homes. There's a new ad out showing the wine being poured and making allusions to the $140,000 wine club that Bruce Rauner mentions. Is that an effective strategy for Pat Quinn?
You know, I don't think it's an ineffective strategy for Pat Quinn, but it's interesting. What I've seen Rauner do is sort of try to glamorize his wealth and his position as opposed to apologize for it. So he is, I think, learning from some of the lessons that Mitt Romney learned the hard way. You know, it is what it is. He has a lot of money. He belongs to expensive wine clubs. And in fact, the $140,000 one, I believe, is the same one our mayor belongs to as well. And the 2 are personal friends, by the way. But, you know, what's at this point, he has owned up to it. He doesn't apologize for it. He's described himself as being in the 1% of the 1%, not just the 1%. And he is attempting to shift that perception as one of, look, I've achieved success in a state where the homeless rate has doubled in the last 5 years. I can lead the state to prosperity. And I think that that is an effective strategy right now when unemployment is so high and there's such a fiscal crisis in the state of Illinois.
Deborah, should we care that Bruce Rauner is wealthy? At the end of the day, does it matter?
I don't think it matters. And to the end of the negative attack ads, I think people are savvy enough to do the research. They're not just going to be swayed by what they're seeing with commercials and all the negative pieces that you find on print or on air. I think people are savvy enough to do their research, but I don't think it matters that he's wealthy. And if it were to matter, I think to the end of people wanting to thrive, to be better, and to have a financial stable situation for themselves, that is motivation for them.
Well, while Quinn is portraying Rauner as this out-of-touch rich guy, Rauner is portraying Quinn as not only an ineffective governor, but you've seen these ads with Quinocchio, portraying him as a liar about income taxes. In terms of that negative strategy, what do you think?
You know, we're in a situation now where, Donald Trump once said, it takes 7 years for politicians to do what a rich man can do in 1 year. And so that's not to say that money equals credibility, but I think that it's good that Governor Quinn has an opponent who is formidable enough to maybe increase voter turnout, get people excited about the gubernatorial race. I think that it's good that people don't go lock, stock, and barrel and just hit D for Democrat when they're in the voting booth. I think it's good, I think it's healthy to have candidate competition. And in the state of Illinois, such a blue state, that I think becomes a tragedy when people just vote one way regardless of how credible the candidate is, Chris.
One of the things that Quinn is doing this week, actually, is he's trying to live on the minimum wage.
Right.
And when he takes out, which in Illinois is, what, $12 an hour, right? $12.25. So when you take out transportation and other costs, he figures it leaves him about $79 a week to eat on. Is this a stunt, or is this something that's more than a stunt?
I think it's a stunt. And, to the end, is it just for 1 week? How long is he going to, stay in this space when people are in this space on a consistent basis? And I, personally don't think that'll be a way for me as a viewer or as a voter to make a determination to vote for him because he's taking this tactic now.
But doesn't it reinforce that he's on the side of the little guy here?
I don't think so. I agree with Deborah on this one. I think it comes across as if he can pretend to be among the commoners for the day. And I actually found it a little offensive. I mean, he's still, being driven to work in his limousine, and he's still living in his governor's mansion. And I'm not necessarily criticizing his transportation mechanism or the home in which he lives. But I do agree with Deborah. It comes across as a stunt. And getting back to something she said earlier as well, you know, more and more voters are, I do agree with Gerard that the negative ads do work. That's why they keep running them. But more and more voters are taking it upon themselves, not only to research the candidates, but to advocate for their candidates, particularly on social media, which really, I believe, is going to transform the way that campaigns are run in the United States. I mean, you're already seeing this happen in third world countries in the Middle East, where social media is having a dramatic impact, allowing politicians that normally would not have had access to those types of dollars to get their message across via millions of voters who advocate for them online.
But so far in Illinois, it's still the old-fashioned, let's spend money on negative television ads. So in the governor's race, the latest polls have Rauner up about 8 points. But let's talk about another race very quickly, because there was an unusual or surprising poll out this week suggesting that Dick Durbin, Senator Dick Durbin, the incumbent, who is a majority whip, #2 most powerful person in the U.S. Senate, is getting more of a race from Jim Oberweis than many pundits thought. Is that a surprise to you?
I don't find it to be a surprise. I mean, when you think about politics, again, it's not business as usual. People are, you know, really understanding the infrastructure as it relates to politics, and I think people are doing their research. And so, to the end of the politicians, they cannot perform the way that they once did. It's not business as usual. I was just looking, and I see that candidate Oberweis was endorsed by Bishop Trotter. So this weekend he went to one of the predominantly black churches in Chicago, a mega church in fact, and he's gotten the endorsement of a person in that space. And I think that.
What do you make of that, Gerard?
And the black vote in Chicago and in Cook County and in the northern portion of Illinois is so important. You're seeing more Republican candidates. There are more conservative candidates saying, you know what, I'm going to court that black vote. I'm going to court that black church and some of the wealthy in the black elite, because I think if we can get them to flip, maybe other blacks throughout the community, South Side and West Side, will flip as well. Oberweis, people are drinking his milk. So,
but listen, realistically, I mean, he's been a perennial candidate. Does he realistically face a chance, or is this just going to be a wake-up call for Dick?
Chris, here's the other thing, though, and I'm sorry to interrupt. Senator Durbin has been vocal all this week about the race. Before he's cruised through the senatorial elections, he knows that he's got an opponent now.
Charmaine, very quickly, does he have a chance, though, Oberweis?
I think that the polls are a little bit misleading. I think the particular polls that were in question here are questionable polling methodology. The YouGov poll is online surveys that I use in litigation, which is fine. But when we're talking about political polling, the sampling does not necessarily reflect the voting.
Some of these are robo polls, too, which are not the most
Yes, that's right. That's the one
polls.
that teamed up with the Sun-Times, is the robo polls that takes place in one day. Right. Having said that, I agree Oberweis is running a good campaign. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at his record, he's a Republican. He voted down the ratification of the Equal Protection Act, that basically all it says is women are entitled to equal rights as men. And he voted that down.
One more political story quickly. Mayor Emanuel here in Chicago, of course, is running for re-election. He also is grabbing onto the minimum wage issue this week. He has signed an executive order requiring city contractors to pay $13 an hour. And it doesn't look like he's got any serious opposition. Why?
I mean, your entry to your newscast, when you look at your first story, it's the suburban communities being impacted by poverty. And so when you think about it, I mean, it's the right thing to do. It's not just an inner city issue.
The minimum wage.
Minimum wage. But when you think about just to the end of poverty and how that impacts that space, I think to the end, it's not just an inner city issue anymore. And I think if he wants to win re-election, he needs to get on board, and I see that he is, and there's not going to be much opposition as it relates from city council.
There'll be some backlash from contractors, though. You know, when you're going from paying an employee $8 or $11 an hour to $13 an hour, that's going to hurt some contractors that will be forced to pay that wage.
Also in the city, a big issue may be coming up in light of what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, where an unarmed black man was shot to death by police. Here in Chicago, they're going to consider cameras for police officers, body cameras. They do this in San Diego. They've got 500 them out there now. What do you think about that?
You're
shaking your head.
Smart.
Okay.
Smart. I mean, they are to protect and to serve. And when you just recently, I saw on the news where a police officer, here it is, a high-speed chase, and they pulled over the wrong person. It was a woman and her 3 kids, and they're screaming. They had no clue what was going on. So if they had not had that on camera for that woman to defend her situation, I think it's the right thing to do is for them to protect and to serve.
Does it protect everybody, Sherman, the officer as well as the perpetrator?
Well, I think there's a few issues involved. One of the issues is in cities that have employed this technology, complaints against officers have actually dropped. Almost 90%. I think the statistic I read was 88%. So what you can gather from that information is the frivolous complaints tend to not arise. What you can also gather from that information is when you have legitimate complaints, that there can be, as Deborah said, an actual investigation and actual consequences. You know, I think a lot of people would agree that the situation in Ferguson would not have spiraled so out of control as it did were the officer who was responsible for the violence in the first instance treated appropriately and investigated appropriately, as opposed to the assumption that he did absolutely nothing wrong. So I do think that it can protect the officers. And I like the idea, you know, I was talking with somebody yesterday about Big Brother's watching and Big Brother's cameras are expanding. Well, this is an opportunity for the American people to look at Big Brother.
I love it.
Yeah. Because we're talking about the military arm of the state here.
Any downside, Gerard, to this?
I don't think so. I'm all for George Orwell, 1984. Yeah. I believe in body cameras. I believe that we should have more cameras in neighborhoods that have nefarious activity, South Side, West Side. I believe that there should be hero cameras in trees, GoPro cameras, because I think that there's too many activities that go unseen and, you know, violate my civil liberties. I want a safe community, and if cameras can contribute to a safe community, I'm all for it.
That could be a scary thought, though. I mean,
it is a very scary thought, but I think it might be because the reason is that we normally associate that type of environment with a dictatorship. You know, I think about Cuba. I was a Canadian citizen before I moved to the United States, so I've traveled to Havana. And there are essentially information guards on every city block that disable people from moving from one block to another, so as to disable them from exchanging information with one another, so as to disable the population from being learned about what's going on in the next block. But when you conceive of it in a democratic society, I mean, there has to be safeguards, there has to be protections, of course. But I think that it's a new idea, really, to have it in a democratic society as opposed to a dictatorship.
We want to turn to sorry to interrupt, we want to turn to a positive note to conclude here, and a shout out to the Jackie Robinson West Little League team, and here they are at Millennium Park.
You know, this is just not Chicago's team. This is Major League Baseball's team. This is the NBA's team. This is the NFL's team. This is the NHL's team. This is the PGA team. This is America's team.
On behalf of me and everybody else, we just want to say thank you for our support. We saw most of it from down there.
So, Deborah, why did this so resonate with Chicago, this story?
Positivity. I mean, when you think about the positivity that came from it, who doesn't get, you know, inspired by a positive story? And when you think about all the negative, you know, stories that we've been hearing in the Chicagoland area, to hear something positive, I was just jazzed up. And I will tell you, I have never seen a baseball game this season at all, and I was on board. I was like, this is great, and it really gives the kids something to aspire to. And when you think about it, it was just great. It was overall great.
Charmaine, you had a kind of a cautionary thought about this, though, what I found interesting.
Well, I was struck by the fact that one of these kids is homeless. And, you know, this team, what they've demonstrated is the incredible heart, spirit, character, and integrity that these kids have. Whereas normally you think of black kids from the south side of Chicago, that is not the impression that you have or the image of them that you have. And you know what? These aren't the only kids on the south side that have this type of character and integrity. And what I would like to see is I would like to see the community viewing their success and their fame, not just for the 5 seconds that the spotlight is shining, but after the spotlight's shut off, to really have a deeper understanding of the potential that our black youth have in the south side of Chicago, Chicago. And I would like to see the community mobilizing, not to just throw parades for them, but to provide them for better opportunities in the future.
We have to leave it there on that eloquent note. Thank you very much. And thanks to our guests, Gerard McClendon, Charmine Cruz, and Deborah Olivia Farmer. This summer, you may have noticed some colorful trees around Chicago. Some local artists have breathed new life into some old limbs. Mark Schneider is not your ordinary carpenter. The veteran film set builder is taking his passion for constructing birdhouses to new heights.
I wanted to make some birdhouses to put up around my parents' house because there's a lot of birds around there, and it's just kind of nice to have some wrens or, you know, some other songbirds around. It's kind of a therapy or relaxation to me.
Schneider has taken his Hollywood imagination to the treetops, taking century-old dead limbs and bringing them back to life in his own artistic way.
I start to make like a structure that I know would function as a birdhouse, and then kind of build around that. It kind of turned into a fish.
Schneider is among 10 artists creating sculptures from lifeless trees around the Windy City. The Chicago Tree Project is a program led by the Chicago Park District and Chicago Sculpture International, a nonprofit that aims to advance the art of sculpture. They have teamed up to create public art from trees destroyed by the troublesome emerald ash borer.
I think we always assume that you're going to go to the park and have a beautiful tree. Many of us didn't realize the fact that there are some things going on in nature that are starting to chip away at that.
These little green bugs are a huge problem, killing thousands of the estimated 85,000 ash trees in Chicago.
It's a creative reuse of trees in that we get to change the tree and transform it into something artistic, and it puts art out into the community, which is one of our missions.
That's some impressive work. How long did it take you to do this?
I think it's great. I mean, when I heard about it, I thought, oh man, this is, you know, like a really good idea.
Oh, that's pretty impressive, man. I like your work. This is really nice. Yeah, well, it's a nice improvement around for this neighborhood too.
The artwork incorporates carving patterns, painting, and adding materials from fabrics and extension cords to sticks and bark.
The bark that I'm using is all from different trees. It's got to be kind of thick and solid so that I can, you know, nail it. Try to use bigger pieces if I can, but it doesn't always, you know, fit the curvature of the birdhouse.
Chicago Sculpture International selected the 10 local artists, giving them an opportunity to display their talents and draw attention to the diseased trees.
These artists have been doing art for a long time, so not everyone can come up to a tree and have a notion that's going to transform into something beautiful.
It's just nice to see the city support the arts. It just, you know, it really kind of adds a lot to the community here and to the park. It's been a lot of fun.
To see more of the tree sculptures and the artists, log on to our website and click on In the Loop.
Well, that does it for this week. You are now in the loop. Until next time, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Good night.
Good night.